This is episode 98 of The Variety Artist. This is John Abrams, your host, and that guy that interviews successful variety artists from around the world every single week. Thanks to you, the Variety Artist shop is rocking. People are getting their favorite quotes from their favorite guests on mugs, t-shirts, all sorts of things. The best sellers so far are Michael Paul's I've Skyrocketed to the Middle and Celeste DeCamp's You Can't Be Sad When You Dance. I love both of those. All right, on to the interview. There's so much great stuff on this one, I won't spoil the surprise. Enjoy the show.
Fun fact number 147. Neither of John's parents are involved in the arts.
Welcome to The Variety Artist, providing aspiring artists and entertainers with in-depth discussions from top performers from all over the world. So get ready to book some gigs, make some money, and have some fun with your host, John Abrams.
Diagnosed with Tourette syndrome at age 6, Jason has overcome the impossible and become an internationally award-winning sleight-of-hand artist, author, and professional speaker. He's had tons of TV appearances, 2 TEDx talks, and entertained and spoken at over 100 military bases. Variety artist, I give you Jason Michaels.
All right, man, this is going to be fun. I've been looking forward to this for a couple of days now. This is great.
All right, well, let's start this right off. What is Tourette syndrome?
Yeah, Tourette syndrome is a neurological disorder. It's a brain disorder. They believe it's a genetic disorder. They think it's passed down from parent to child. The way that it manifests itself, it's a little bit complicated because there's a lot of unknowns with Tourette syndrome, things that it doesn't always respond well to treatments and things like that. But the way it manifests itself in what doctors refer to as tics, T-I-C-S, tics. Those tics are either vocal or movement. They're rapid, repetitive, and uncontrollable movements or vocalizations. Sometimes they just look like twitches. Sometimes they're big, giant movements. Sometimes you can't see them at all. Some of the tics that I have will be like a stomach tensing, where you tense your stomach muscles up over and over again. And, a normal person just watching me can't tell that I'm doing it, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. Most people know that Tourette syndrome is sort of the strange disorder that makes you curse uncontrollably.
Right.
But you don't have to worry about that because I don't have that type of Tourette syndrome.
All of a sudden on the podcast, I'm rating it E.
It's not true. When I'm playing golf, I have an unbelievable case of it. But
yeah, when I'm driving, I think I have an
right.
So you said it's hereditary. Do your parents have that, or?
It's one of those things where I can personally see a little bit of it in I have a sibling that I can see little tiny bits of it. I've heard my mom say that every now and then she sees a little something here and there with my dad. My case is certainly the most pronounced. Mm. If we were to look at my family, you wouldn't see really anything in anybody in my family besides me. I'm the one who it just kind of really got a hold of, and that it really comes out with, and it came out a lot. For most people, it's something that occurs when you're a young person. So, I think I read somewhere that the average age is like 6 or 7, where folks are diagnosed with it, and then it starts to lessen in severity as you get into adulthood. And for some adults, it more or less kind of goes away, not completely, but a lot. But for others like me, mine went away for a little while, like when I was in my 20s or so, but then it kind of came back.
How was that when it went away? Did you think to yourself, I'm done with this forever? Or what were you thinking?
It's an interesting question. It just, you don't think about something when you don't have it. I think it was just kind of like one day it just wasn't there. The thing about Tourette syndrome is the way that it kind of comes out is you don't pay that much attention to it until you're having a really bad attack of tics where like it's just shutting you down. It's literally stop. You could be walking and it literally stops you in your tracks and you just start having all these weird, strange movements. At least that's what it looks like to an onlooker. And then it kind of is over and you're just back to normal. So when that type of thing isn't happening, you just kind of go about your daily life. And then what ends up happening is, for me, it kind of came back and I I realized, oh, wow, I hadn't been doing that for a long time. Oh, why is it back? You know, like, what's this about? Come on.
Was there any reasoning, or it just simply came back?
Yeah, it just came back. I mean, I don't know if someday down the road somebody will finally understand it and truly be able to say, well, these are the reasons that it came back, but I couldn't pinpoint anything.
What do you think are some of the misconceptions that people have about people with Tourette's?
It's one of those things where it's kind of, okay, so first off, when I was diagnosed, there wasn't very much known about it. People really didn't know what it was very well. My mom was a real champion for me. She would go in and talk to my classes and my teachers and let them know this was something that was just me. They didn't have to treat me special or anything like that, but I think she just wanted it to make it a point so that they didn't make fun of me or point it out or anything like that. I personally, for a very, 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 very long time, didn't want to talk about it. I was very embarrassed by it because I didn't have control over myself.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still have it, and I still have these things, these tics that come out, and it's still true. As an adult, as a much, much older person, years later, I finally started being willing to acknowledge it and gain some, I guess you would say, gain some control over it. Not control like being able to control it like the tics, but just not feeling as embarrassed anymore. And, you know, so you have a much better educated public today than it was way back when.
Yeah.
And as far as what people think, it's an interesting thing. I don't know what people think. I think people think it's that disorder that makes you curse. I think people, when they look at me, when I'm performing or when I'm speaking, most of the tics don't come out. And it was a strange sort of realization that occurred when I went out for a school play, is that when I was up on stage, the tics just for some strange reason didn't come out. And I don't know if it had something to do with my unbelievable embarrassment, and I just was able to, they just kind of shut themselves off because of the amount of focus that I was focused on saying the right lines at the right time or delivering the script correctly or whatever, or nowadays performing on stage doing magic or doing a speech. I don't know if that's why they turned off, although I think that's probably the reason.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't see it when I'm on stage, but see me sitting in the corner of a room somewhere or just going about my daily life, and you'll see it plenty.
Right. That's interesting that you say that, because I've had a few stutterers on this podcast, and they say almost the exact same thing.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. When they were either singing, if they're a singer, or if they were doing magic, if they were a magician, or speaking, they wouldn't have the stuttering attacks. I don't know what they call it.
Right.
Because they're focused and
right,
more in charge of their entire persona, what they're doing, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. My theory is that when you're performing, you're under that stress of performing, like, you know that someone's watching. I think that there's just a heightened sense of control. A lot of, for me, especially when I was a young person, most of the time that the tics really came out was when I was tired, when I was sitting at my house on the couch watching TV. I was tired. It was the end of the day. I was relaxing. I wasn't trying to control anything. I was just there. And that's when the tics really were at their most, when they were at their strongest. So it may have something to do with the amount of effort somebody puts into specifically trying to focus on what you're doing, and your focus is so strong, the tics are unable to come out.
Did you have to turn it around, or did you just start doing magic and speaking and things, or was this part of your whole journey?
I have a friend, I think the guy who introduced us, Stephen Bargatze, he was the one who ultimately, he knew my story, he knew me, and he was the one who pretty much, he's a very persistent guy. And once he gets an idea in his head, he thinks he is persistent until you do what he says. And so he basically said to me one day, he said, you should talk about your Tourette's. You should be willing to talk about this. Now, this was years ago when I was not willing to even really acknowledge having Tourette syndrome, much less being willing to be comfortable talking about it. And so it was him, because of his persistence and the fact that he kind of was able to open my eyes as to how it would help other people to share sort of my story of living with this uncontrollable tic disorder.
Well, not only living with it, but becoming very successful.
Yeah, no, I've been very fortunate to be around great people. I work hard to do my best to perform well and to try to put my stamp on the magic that I perform so that it has a little bit of my personality and my flavor in it. And then I had to educate myself on the business, because that's kind of one of the funny things about doing magic as a profession is that I don't know anybody who really got into magic because they thought, hey, here's a good business decision.
Yeah. Oh, it'll be easy.
So yeah, as far as the having had some success, there are a lot of people that I could point to and thank for opening doors or creating opportunities. But then to a certain extent, I just had to be willing to educate myself on the business side of things. And it was just a long process over time. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing that a guy with an uncontrollable movement disorder would have any success at all as a professional entertainer. It's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, let's talk about your entertaining then. You have 2 TEDx talks. How do TEDx talks come about?
So both of my TEDx talks came about because folks recommended me to the TEDx selection committee. And it was based on just sort of one of them was based on my story, the fact that I was an entertainer, professional entertainer, who's making his living in the entertainment business, who had Tourette syndrome. The other one was based on my interest in, as a sleight-of-hand artist. And I've done a lot of different type of magic. I've done sleight-of-hand. I've done big illusions. I've done a little bit of everything throughout my career. But as a sleight-of-hand artist, I've always been fascinated by scam. And so I got recommended to the selection committee, and then the selection committee reaches out to you, or they reached out to me. This is how it worked when I did it. They reached out to me and they said, someone has recommended you. We've looked at your information. Do you have a topic you would be interested in speaking on? Would you please, basically, what would you want to talk about? What does that look like? It was kind of like them saying, hey, pitch us what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
And so I created sort of a little small proposal for both of the TEDx groups and said, here's what I would talk about and here's what it would look like.
So you created that talk specifically for that TEDx talk?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah. And what's funny about that is that, so I've done 2. One of them is about scams. And the second one, which to me is sort of one of the more pivotal moments of my career, was when I decided to say, okay, I'm going to talk about having Tourette's. Mm-hmm. So Stephen Bargatze goes out and he speaks to a lot of groups growing up under difficult circumstances. Just his life when he was a kid was difficult, and he goes out and he talks to these groups about that. And so he had referred me a couple of times to some groups when he couldn't do them. And this is how he's persistent. So basically he would say to me, hey, this group wants to hire you, but you have to talk about Tourette's. And I was like, gummit. But I had spoken a few times about it a little bit. But then when I had this invitation, this TEDx talk, I was at a point where I said, you know what? Let's use this to be your jumping off point. Let's really kickstart this thing, and let's be willing to open up about it.
And thank goodness you did, because it seems like you've been very successful doing it.
It's, I couldn't tell you how important, I can't stress the importance of it enough. It's an unbelievable thing that happened to me when I decided to start talking about it. One of my first professional gigs after doing the TED talk about Tourette's, I went and I did a show. I basically pitched them. They wanted a magic show, this corporate group. And I said, here's my TEDx talk. Would you be interested in me doing half of it being a show and then the other half sort of my story? And they said, oh, this is cool. We like this.
Yeah.
And what happened was that I got halfway through the show, and then I thought to myself, man, they're having fun. Why are you going to bring the whole thing down by talking about this? Why did you pitch this? But then I had already committed to doing it. So I said, well, just do it anyway, because you've already committed to it. So I did it, and it got a really good response. And afterwards, I was talking to some folks, and this lady comes up to me, and she says to me, and this always gets me. She said to me, I just want to thank you for being willing to share what you shared today, because my son committed suicide 2 years ago and I haven't been able to process it and I haven't known what I was supposed to do. But by hearing you talk about what you've had to deal with, I now know that I have to go out and I have to help other people who have dealt with this same thing. Nobody had ever opened up to me and had an emotional connection like that by doing magic tricks.
Yeah.
And this was one of the very first real times I had chosen to really get deep on it. That's what happened, that sort of unbelievable emotional connection where I wasn't just a guy doing fun stuff anymore, but I connected with an audience in a way. It was almost life-changing to me, because I was like, okay, I get it. I understand why this was so important to Stephen, why he wanted me to do this, because now I have the opportunity to connect with people and maybe change somebody's life.
Yeah, he understood before you understood.
Oh, way before. Oh, way before. Yeah. He was much smarter than I was.
I don't know about that, but I think it's because he went through something similar. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
You can listen to his story on, I don't know, what is it, number 90 of my podcast. I interviewed Stephen. He's terrific.
Yeah. Oh, he's great.
Really nice guy. And he tells his story about what he went through on my show.
Yeah, no, he's a good friend.
Yeah. When he referred you because we were talking about his experience with doing the military shows.
Oh yeah, sure.
And he said, you have to get Jason Michaels on here and talk all about it. So what is Operation Magic All-Stars?
Operation Magic All-Stars. Yeah, that started about 5 years ago. I was just doing my shows, out hustling along. And I got a phone call from an agent that I worked with somewhat frequently. He said, hey, Jason, have you ever had any interest in doing shows for the military? And I said, oh my gosh, this would be like a dream come true, because I was pretty close to joining the military myself. I grew up with two grandparents that were in World War II. And I remember the one who lived near me, the one grandparent, my grandfather on my mom's side, I remember lots of stories that he would tell about, living on different Air Force bases and just the things that he did as a pilot in the Air Force. And so I was very close to joining the military. And I said, oh man. And so I said to my agent, I would love to do that. And he said, well, why don't you send me the information that you want me to put in front of them. Let's just see if there's an opportunity, because he had made some connections with some folks and he was thinking about who would be good for them. And he thought of me. And so I sent the information to the agent and he presented it to the folks that he knew. Mm-hmm. It was just a couple of days later. It was one of those rare occasions where it just seemed like it was a perfect fit, because it was a very short period of time later that he called me back and said, well, they want you. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So I asked Stephen, I said, Stephen, would you be interested in going overseas to do some shows for the military? And he said, I would love to. So we worked out the dates and he went with me on my very first tours, just he and I. We went to Southwest Asia, which if you are not in the military and don't understand what that means, that actually means the Middle East. So I don't know why they call it Southwest Asia, but it's actually the Middle East. So, right. So we went there and we had a great time. It was very challenging. They're very rewarding shows, at least for me. I find them very rewarding because I feel like I'm performing for folks that I could have been one of them. I could have been one of those people sitting in the audience watching the entertainers on a military base. That would have been very easy for that to happen. They just started saying, let's do more of them.
Oh yeah. What does a day doing military shows look like?
It depends, because there are different types of bases in different types of circumstances. I'll tell you about the most recent one that I did. I was in the Middle East again. Actually, no, I wasn't. I was in Africa.
You get yourself confused.
Yeah. So I was in Africa, and probably 2:00 in the morning, I woke up because I had to go to the bathroom. So I got out of my cot. I walked on a plywood floor to the front of the little makeshift tent, and I walked out into the 100-degree heat, and I walked to a latrine, which was probably 100 yards away.
Wait, so it's 100 degrees at 3 a.m?
Well, okay, it may have been 90. So
It's just hot.
yeah, it's just hot. Oh, and by the way, the tent is 65 degrees so it's very easy to get a cold because the really cold, if they keep it cold inside the tent, that keeps the insects away.
Oh, okay.
So I went to the latrine. I went back, got back in my cot, went back to sleep, woke up, several hours later and got up and went to breakfast in the DFAC, which stands for the dining facility. And we had breakfast with some of the other members of my team who were with me. And then I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, we went to the airfield and we flew to another base where we performed a show that afternoon. Late in the afternoon, we flew back. We flew in, we're on a military flight. So we're in those webbed seats, and we're sitting on the sides of the aircraft. And they were flying nap of the earths, which means that they're literally, I don't know how high exactly we were off the ground, but I was looking through the window and it looked like maybe a couple of 100 yards off the earth. So they're flying right basically the terrain. And we said, why are they flying? And then after about 20 minutes of that, they took off and went up high to whatever, 30,000, 20,000 feet, whatever it was. And we asked one of the people that was with us and they said, well, why are they flying like this? And the guy said, oh, that way the country that we were in, he said, oh, it's because if we fly any higher than that, then the air defense system will get triggered. They won't shoot at us, but when their air defense system triggers, it triggers our flares. So all of a sudden we shoot out a bunch of flares, and we don't want to shoot out a bunch of flares on accident. So, so it's that type of thing where it might be insanely hot. It's very stressful on your body as far as you may do a lot of walking. You carry your stuff everywhere you go. I mean, as far as your show gear and your show bag, you might do a show on a stage.
You're traveling light then, so you're probably doing smaller illusions.
Well, I was doing just a show out of a backpack. So I was doing basically a stand-up show. I might be performing on a stage for a couple of hundred people with a sound system and some basic lighting. But then again, I've also shown up at gigs where they said, hey, we want you to perform over there. And they point to the corner of the lunchroom with a mic stand and a mic. And it's like, okay. Because they, these folks they try to set it up so that you have everything that you need to succeed. And they do an unbelievably good job at it. They do an incredible good. The folks on the ground, that their job is to make sure you put on a great performance and can do a great program, they will give you the shirt off their back. But the thing is, some of the places are absolutely fantastic. Literally, I've played in bases where it was state of the art, a beautiful theater, sound, lights, everything. But I've also played places where they said, in the corner of the lunchroom. It's like, all right.
So it's kind of like your old college days when you were performing at colleges.
You know what? It does feel like that a little bit. It just depends on what they have. You may go to a base, like Ramstein Air Force Base has like 70,000 people on it. It's like a city. Then again, you also might go to a base that has 100 people on it. You can imagine the difference in what the facilities are like and what they have available to you. But the whole point of doing it, the reason that we do it, so I'm not trying to make it sound like it's brutal or it's terrible. The whole point of doing it is because you have men and women, and some of the bases have families, and these are folks that are, at least with one of the groups that I work with, that are deployed overseas. What I do, and the folks who I take with me, the whole point is to give them a taste of home. Some of these folks, we go places and they haven't had entertainment in 6 months.
Yeah.
That's not the case very often, but it does happen, and so what we're doing is we're going to make them laugh. We're going to make them smile. We're going to give them something fun to think about. And they may think about it for a week, because one of the things that I learned from talking to the men and women that we've worked for is that at some of these bases, their jobs very much feel like Groundhog Day. They wake up, they go to their job, they go to sleep. They wake up, they go do the same thing they did the day before, they go to sleep. And it's that way every single day. It just depends. It can be state of the art and just like a modern day city, every single thing you can imagine, or it can be literally in the desert, sleeping on a cot.
So are those some of your favorite performances when you get off that stage or dirt area?
I love them. I told my agent one time, I said, this probably isn't realistic. I said, but if I could only make my living just doing these for the rest of my career, I'd be okay with that. Because number one, these folks feel a lot like home to me. They just feel like my people, and they're unbelievable what they're willing to sacrifice in order to make sure that we are safe. Mm-hmm. Number two, I got into entertainment because I wanted to share the same experience that I had when I was a 16-year-old kid and I walked into a magic shop and got blown away. I wanted to share that moment, that experience with other people.
Well, now, when I had Stephen Bargatze on, he mentioned something about crazy can fly. He says you have to ask him about crazy can fly. Okay. So what's that all about?
Crazy Can Fly is the perfect combination story of Tourette syndrome and magic for the military.
What happened?
On our tour, the one that we did, the very first one we ever did, we did the Middle East, but we also did some places in Africa. And we were in Ethiopia, and we were at an airport. We were leaving. We went to get our tickets. The airport is confusing because what you do is you go get your ticket at the ticket counter at this specific airport. And then I had an extra bag. So I had the bag that they would let me carry, and then I had another one. And so that's the one I had to pay for. Okay. So what they made me do was they made me leave the line, go to another window, which was halfway across the airport, to go pay for it and get a receipt and bring it back to the ticket counter. Okay. And they basically make everybody wait in line while I go do that. Very efficient.
Yeah.
So Stephen and I are up there. They say, "Oh, you have to go pay for your bag." I go, "Okay." Now I had done this before, so it wasn't the first time. So I understood. I was like, "Okay, I'm going to go pay for my bag." So I walk off. The lady behind the thing looks at Stephen, and she sees me, and I'm standing in line at the other window, and I'm having some of the tics. And a lot of my tics they look like head movements where I kind of am twitching my head and moving my head around a lot. And she looked at me, and then she looked at Stephen, and she said, "What's wrong with your friend?" And he looks at me, and he goes, "No, nothing's wrong with him. He knows that he has to pay for the bag because he doesn't understand what she's saying." And she goes, No. Something's wrong with him. Look at him. He's got something wrong with him." Mm-hmm. And then Stephen looks at me and goes, "Oh, okay. Now, how am I going to tell this lady in Ethiopia that doesn't speak English as a first language? How am I going to explain Tourette syndrome to her?" This is what he's thinking to himself.
Yeah.
And he's trying to figure this out. And she goes, "I'll get my manager." So the manager comes up and she goes, and now you have to keep in mind, I don't know about any of this because I'm paying for my bag in the other line. I don't know that any of this happened.
So you're sitting there minding your own business, doing your own thing.
Exactly. And so the manager comes up and says, "What's the problem?" And she says, "Look at his friend. His friend is sick." And the manager goes, Oh, look, yeah, we have to get the doctor to clear him to fly. And the doctor was already gone for the day. You'll have to come back tomorrow. And now that is not an option. And so Stephen is like, he's trying to figure it out. So he starts going, "Oh no, no." And he starts pointing to his head. And he goes, he has Tourette syndrome. Well, Stephen keeps pointing at his own head, but he's trying to figure out how to say this so that they'll understand it. And he starts moving his hand around his head as if, you know how you would say the gesture you would give if you were describing somebody's loco?
Oh yeah, like that's a crazy person over there.
Right. So he's saying he's got Tourette syndrome, but he's moving his hand around like I'm loco. And then the manager goes, "He's crazy?" And Stephen goes, And the manager goes, "Oh, he's fine. My brother-in-law is crazy. Crazy can fly. Sick cannot fly, but crazy can fly." And they let me, and I didn't even know this happened until 6 months later when Stephen told me.
He didn't even tell you that, so you just came back and you just got on the plane.
He didn't. I didn't even know anything happened. He literally told me, it was like 6 months later, and he was like, we were in the car going somewhere, and he was like, I have to tell you something. And I was like, what? He said, I don't know how you're going to feel about it. I was like, what do you mean? Just tell me. And so he told me, and I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard.
That's pretty funny. That's great. Now, when you were in Ethiopia, you mentioned something about, or earlier, you mentioned something about magic and massages in Ethiopia.
Oh, magic and massages. Oh, my gosh. I tell you, that trip to Ethiopia, Ethiopia was, it's a beautiful place. It has both, you see beautiful things there, and it's also poverty-stricken. It's just a land of extremes. It's really interesting. We were staying at a place that was a resort. Now, your definition of resort and their definition of resort, what you're picturing in your head is not what it was. It was nice enough. It was perfect. It was actually perfectly fine. But they had this massage building in this resort, and they said, oh, you can get massages and stuff. So it was in the daytime before we were going to go perform a show for a bunch of military folks. And Stephen was like, all right, let's do it. So we got these massages. Now, I've never really had massages. I'm not a big, like, let's go get massage type of guy. It's not my thing. I mean, it's just, anyway. So we go to the thing, and they say, we'll go and shower off and then change. And so we go do that, and we're putting on this robe, and they say, okay, you go to this room and you go to that room. Well, so I'm in this room.
I'm getting nervous over here.
Oh, dude, I was like, what have I gotten myself into? When I heard massages, I was like, this is a great idea. But now I'm thinking to myself, this is the worst idea we've ever had. She comes in, and like, she basically like rips off the robe and starts doing the massage on me. And I'm like, okay, this is very uncomfortable, but I'll just have to relax. And then she takes out these little things that look like ping pong paddles, and she proceeds to beat the bottom of my feet. And I'm just like, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh God, oh Lord, stop. And I am holding on for dear life. My knuckles are white. I'm holding on. She is destroying my feet. The same thing, Stephen tells the story, and he said the same thing was happening to him. And he said as soon as it started happening, he started dying laughing, because he knew that I was thinking to myself, is this what a massage is? Yeah, it was kind of one of those things you had to be there to experience. But
well, that sounds pretty crazy. So did she end up doing like a massage, or was it just the paddle thing?
No, she ended up doing the massage. I don't know why she did the paddle thing. All that I know was she was basically just wearing my feet out. And I was like, why are you beating my feet up so bad?
Yeah, I wonder if at some point in time before you guys got in there, someone said, you know what those Americans love?
Yeah, right. They love to be beaten with a paddle.
Yeah, with ping pong paddles. All right, so enough silliness. Let's get into some business.
Okay.
You have some business insights for us? You've been doing this for quite a while. You have some business insights for us?
Yes. First business insight. Be careful whose advice you take.
Especially if they're a masseuse in Ethiopia.
It's an interesting business we're in. We're in a creative business. And it seems to me like there's always somebody who has an opinion about how other people need to be doing their business. I, in the past, I was very comfortable measuring myself up against other people. So I would read an article in a magazine, or I would hear an interview or whatever. And if I was hearing from somebody who had had any success in business, and that I was trying to learn, and I thought, oh, this is somebody I should pay attention to, I would always listen to what they said, and I would always measure myself up against what they were talking about. And I always found myself lacking. Anytime somebody said, oh, well, if you're not doing this, then you're not doing it right. And what I realized was there are a lot of ways to do this as a business. There are a lot of ways to succeed, and figure out what you want out of it. And then you can listen to what other people have to say, but don't take it to heart that it's necessarily a good fit for yourself. Mm-hmm. Every time I hear somebody talk about I'll talk specifically to magicians just for a second. I know that variety artists, and we're talking to all variety artists, but I'm going to just talk to magicians just for a second.
Yeah.
Every time I hear a magician say that if you're not completely original and coming up with your own stuff, then you're just a hack, I want to punch that person in the face.
Yeah.
Because it's not fair. It's completely unfair to take what you're holding yourself up as and apply it to other people. It's just not right. So I always think to myself, be careful whose advice you're taking. If you do this and you just want to entertain whomever, if you're doing it in a way that you're enjoying yourself, just do that. Just do it to the best of your ability. Have a lot of fun with it. So I'll get off my soapbox, but it always just drives me crazy. Every time somebody tries to hold somebody else up to a standard that person, they don't have the same reasons for doing it.
One of the things I've learned over time, I've done 90, almost 100 episodes. And the first 10, I think I asked different people for different advice. First 10 I listened to, I thought, wow, that's a great idea. I think I'll emulate that. And then 10 more came along and I said, oh, that's a great idea. I think I'll emulate that. And then after a while, it is truly overwhelming. So what you're saying is exactly true. Take what fits you.
Yeah, you're the only person who knows why you're doing what you're doing. And try not to anytime I try to compare myself against somebody else, I always come out a bit depressed because I cannot compare myself to other people. I am not them. I'm not living their life. I don't have their same reasons for doing what I'm doing. So just be you.
Yeah. And not only that, a lot of people have what's called I call it the Facebook syndrome, because you look on Facebook and you see the best possible me.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Sure. Of course.
And you can't compare yourself to that because you're not seeing that the dog peed on the couch earlier today. You're not seeing that on Facebook. You're not seeing all the trials and tribulations that people go through. All they post is their successes. And that's the same with interviews and magazine articles and different things. There's no way you can compare yourself to that because you're going to compare your whole life to their best parts.
Yeah, exactly. The best thing that I did was that I just kind of constantly pushing myself to figure out how to do it better. And I still am. I'm still trying to figure out because sensibilities change over time. The folks that are buying entertainment today are a different group of people than there were 20 years ago.
True.
They have different ways of viewing the world. They have different things that they think are impressive. You're different. You have to communicate with them differently. I always think it's smart to learn from folks who have done it before you, who have done it well, like who truly understand how to do business. And of course, that's what I did. I've worked with lots of different folks as far as trying to learn the best techniques of sales and marketing and putting your best foot forward and branding and all that stuff.
Sure. Are you putting a lot of that in your new course?
Nice segue.
Thank you. Did you like how I just swung that around?
Yeah. I wasn't going to just jump in there myself and say, hey, I've got a course. That's funny.
That's my job.
Yeah, very nice. So let me tell you kind of how this came about.
Well, first, what is the name of your course?
Okay, so the course is called Secrets of Booking Agents and Entertainment Directors Revealed. That's a rather long name. I just call it Secrets of Booking Agents.
Okay.
Over the years, and this is probably true for a lot of people that are in the entertainment business, you work with clients and they say to you, hey, we're hiring you. Can you also help us get some more? And then they'll name what else they're looking for. It may be somebody who does what you do. It may be somebody in a related field. And so you kind of find yourself in a position where it's like, okay, well, I'm a magician. I guess they want a juggler, so I'll go hire a juggler and I'll bring them as part of this. So that's something that a lot of us do. When I started doing things with the military, I started taking a lot of folks with me. And I started to go out and really search for really solid acts. And I was looking at lots of promotional material. I was talking to a lot of folks. I was getting referrals and all that type of stuff. In 2000 and was it 17 or 18? It was a couple of years ago. Nashville, Tennessee had a venue open called the House of Cards, which is a magic venue. It's a fine dining restaurant. They have fine dining, craft cocktails, and magic, and they employ several magicians per night. Well, at the very beginning stages, when they were just thinking about doing this, the owner had gotten in contact with me, kind of asked me if there were enough magicians locally to pull something like this off. And I started working with him to kind of craft what it would look like. And he hired me as the entertainment director. And I worked with him to open the place up, get it fully staffed with magicians, designed the experience that people have when they come in, as far as there were different areas in the restaurant where people would go and watch magic. And I kind of worked with him to make all of that happen. That is another instance where I was basically auditioning folks. I was going out and looking for people. I was watching a lot of promotional material and connecting with folks. And as I was the entertainment director during the first year it was open, I realized to myself, golly, you're getting requests all the time. Between all the different bookings that you have done, all the folks that you have worked with in the military field, all the folks that I've worked with just on the corporate side of my business when I do corporate events and sometimes hire people, and then all the folks that have reached out and wanted to come to House of Cards, I think I have a pretty good bit of knowledge when it comes to booking acts. And so I started making notes, and I started specifically, I would go through, I remember going through just email after email after email, and I would write down the things that people were doing right. I would write down the things that people were doing wrong. And I just made a huge file of these notes. And then I crafted a course. Last year's when I very first launched it, put it out to the world. I crafted a course that basically teaches how to get a booking agent or an entertainment director's attention, the best ways to do that, how to build a relationship with them, and how to do business with them over the course of an entire career, instead of just getting one gig and then being done. You know, like a lot of these clients that hire you for one show, they may hire you once a year.
Right.
What I realized with the agents that I had worked with when I was working in the college market, with the military stuff that I've done, all sorts of different markets, what I realized was that it was a far better business plan for me to connect with an agent who could turn me on to 20 shows at one time.
Yeah.
As opposed to having to connect with 20 different people to get 20 shows. Right. And the other thing that I learned through lots of conversations with lots of agents is that, and here's what's funny. A lot of people say the days of the agent is over. But what I learned is that the best gigs that pay the most money are going to the agents, because somebody that has a lot of money does not want to go hire an entertainer by themselves. They want to go to somebody who has already done the work, has already vetted the entertainment, and knows who is great, and they can trust that person to get them somebody amazing. Absolutely.
You are speaking the truth, my friend.
Yeah.
I've had a few different agents on here talk about that exact same thing.
Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, that's
yeah,
funny.
That the day of the agent is not done. Some people say it is because of the internet. But the truth of the matter is, just like you're saying, more influential people want to make that one phone call and have everything taken care of.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with doing business with one client at a time. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But it was this incredible eye-opening experience when I would be talking to agents and they would go, oh yeah, I just booked this one band and blah, blah, blah. And then as an aside, not trying to prove anything, not trying to impress me, just saying, oh yeah, such and such gets $100,000 per show.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we know this. When you hear of a big giant superstar, oh, well, they get $1 million per show. You go, well, of course, that's a celebrity. But some of the folks that I was hearing about getting $40,000 or $50,000 a show, you've never even heard of.
I've had a lot of them on this show. We've talked in private. You make what?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I thought that this would be an important course to share, that the knowledge that I had to share about things you don't do. Let me just give, I don't know if we may be running a long time, but let me give you.
I mean, if you have the time, I have the time.
Here's one tip. Okay. I could not tell you how many times I got an email that said, hey, my name is Joe Blow. Here's my website. Thanks. And I was like, what? What do you mean, here's my website? First off, who are you? Number two, why are you giving me your website? Do you think that I'm going to go to your website and sell myself on you? Like I'm going to go and I'm going to try to figure out where the stuff is that I need to see so that I can convince myself that you're good enough to be in this place where I'm booking? I couldn't tell you how many times people did that. And that was an instant death to them.
So what do you suggest? If I'm Joe Blow and I want to contact you, what do you suggest that I do?
I would keep the email relatively short. I would say, hi, Jason, I'm Joe Blow. I've heard wonderful things about House of Cards. I'd like to inquire as to your booking requirements, basically asking what is it that you need? Tell me what you need to see. Mm-hmm. If you have a moment, here is a direct link to a highlight reel, and here is a direct link to a performance video. And that would be it. And I'll tell you why. Because a highlight reel does not get you booked by a savvy entertainment person. A good highlight reel will get you booked by people who haven't been burned a few times, but a good highlight reel, the only thing a good highlight reel does is it buys 10 minutes of my time. If I see in 60 seconds that you're really impressive, I'll go watch your performance video. And your performance video is going to sell me on whether or not you should be hired. Because at the end of the day, you can be wonderful. But at the end of the day, the real secret to all of this is just one simple thing. I am booking people based solely on what I think my audience wants. Right. So the simple question that I am asking every single time is this: is this act going to be a hit with my audience? I already know who my audience is. Mm-hmm. Like when I booked House of Cards, I knew who those folks were. And I knew what they're going to like and what they weren't going to like. When I booked the military shows, I know who those folks are. I know what they're going to like and what they're not going to like. Right. And I'm asking the question, will this person be able to entertain my audience? And if you can answer that question, there you go.
Yeah, you're watching those videos through their eyes.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, how about a recommended book? And we'll get you out of here.
Well, how about my book, John?
What book would that be?
No, I wrote a book a couple of years ago called You Can Do the Impossible Too. It's not a business book. It's not a magic book. It's a book. It is a little bit of a magic book. It's more like a book of adventures. I've been unbelievably blessed to be able to travel around the world since I was in my 20s and see different parts of the world by doing magic. Sometimes I was working for other people. Sometimes I was doing my own thing. And I wrote a book about growing up with Tourette syndrome and having these adventures that some people would have thought would be impossible for me to have. If you think of a kid who has an uncontrollable tic disorder wanting to be an entertainer, that sounds like something that's just not going to be possible for them. Yeah. And a couple of years ago, I kind of started feeling my mortality. I'm not old by any means, but you get to certain ages and you just start thinking to yourself, what can I share with other people? If they never hear me speak, if they never hear my story, but they stumble upon a book, for instance, could I share something with them that would be valuable to them? So I basically wrote about the first 20, 25 years of my professional life. And then I also wrote about what it was like to be a kid growing up with Tourette syndrome. And I share some great stories, and I share a couple of very specific success techniques that I employed in my business about what my belief system as far as what I believed I was capable or not capable of doing, the things that I was imagining in my head, the things that I was seeing myself doing in my life and how those things came to fruition, and then the actions that I had to take in order to make those things a reality. I share those success techniques, I share the stories, and I share what it was like to grow up as a kid with Tourette syndrome. So the book has quite a few 5-star reviews on Amazon. I will be honest with you, I didn't write any of the reviews. I just wrote the book.
Tell us the name of that again.
It's called You Can Do the Impossible Too.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and put that on my website. So if someone wants to get that from Amazon, they can just go to my website.
Oh, hey, I'll mention to you and I'll send you a link. I have basically 4 tips on how to do better business. It's a free PDF, and I'm going to send you the direct link that if somebody wants to, I guess probably in the show notes, you can probably put it there. So
yeah, I'll put that in your show notes, and I'll also put that next to your book.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, thanks very much.
2 different places. Okay. Well, great. That was fun. That was fun, my friend.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
That was really good. You were open and fun and honest. And I appreciate everything that you talked about. Do you have some sort of a social media or something that you want to plug before we go?
My Facebook and my Instagram are both Jason Michaels Magic. YouTube is the same.
And thanks to all my variety artists. Tell all your friends about the Variety Artist Podcast. Make sure to visit my new store at thevarietyartist.com/shop, or just go to my website at thevarietyartist.com and click shop. And thanks again, Jason, for hanging out.
All right, man. Take care. Thank you.
Now go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.
That's all for this episode of The Variety Artist, but your journey continues on our website. Go to thevarietyartist.com for more strategies, insight, and resources, as well as show notes on today's guest to assist you in your career. We'll see you on the next episode of The Variety Artist. But until then, go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.